But let's get started here today with talking about navigating salary negotiations and managing your personal budget. So I would say next to politics and religion, the third thing that people usually don't like to talk about is salary, right? No one likes to talk about that area. But at the end of the day, we are all in college to get a job. We all get a job to make money. So talking about how to navigate the salary that we want to allow us the lifestyle that we would like is imperative. So we want to talk to you all about today how to do that confidently and effectively, so you can have, growth along the line. Before we get into that, though, we do, if anyone is able to scan this on their screen, we have our first destination survey. So you're going to hear about this ad nauseum come probably end of March and April, and definitely in May. So here at the Career Center, we conduct this survey every year, our first destination survey. It's conducted by every university, actually, across the country. Our first destination survey is how we collect data on post-graduation outcomes. So you all remember, I'm sure, when you were first-year students coming in and then, administrators saying, with a Fordham degree, you could go to X college for a master's degree or go to X job if you're an X major. So we get that data from this survey. However, it's also so that we can get an understanding of who is still seeking employment after graduation. So if you're still in a place where you're seeking employment, you can indicate this on that survey, and you will get assigned a career counselor who would then follow you throughout your time after Fordham while you're still looking for a job. So definitely feel free to fill that out so that we can help you all, help yourselves as you navigate the job search. Okay. So when we start by thinking about how to navigate salary negotiations, right? We need to first start by thinking about how to set realistic expectations. So students in the class of 2023 overestimated their starting salary by nearly $30,000. So back in 2023, the average college graduate was making around $56,000 when they graduated college. And 2023 grads thought, or who had been surveyed, said that they thought they'd be making $85,000. So that's a pretty big discrepancy there, right? Now, again, that's 2023 data. I would say with inflation, the average college graduate in 2024 is probably making around $65,000, $66,000. But I think the expectation was still around, from what I've heard just around campus, 75 to 80K. So there's still a discrepancy there between 66 and the 75 to 80, right? So people clearly were having misaligned expectations. But then we had 3 and 4 college students who graduated in 2024 who said that they were unsure whether or not they were willing to negotiate their starting salary. So people were not happy with the salaries that they were being offered from the get-go, but then also not being willing to negotiate the salaries that were, coming to them at the table. So something that's nice that you all have access to now that graduates did not have access to 5 or 10 years ago was pay transparency laws. So New York and I think 14 other states plus Washington, D.C. Have now what's called pay transparency laws, which means that they either have to put the exact number that they are willing to offer a candidate on the job description, or at the very least a range. So you'll sometimes see like we're willing to offer between $50,000 and $55,000 depending on experience, skills, etc. And what's nice about pay transparency laws and having that information ahead of time is that you could assess if that's appropriate for you, and more importantly, if that's in line with market value. So you could go into your job search tracker or wherever you keep a collection of all of your job descriptions that you're looking to apply to and say, okay, this job is offering 65K and this is offering 67K. You should go through with the interview for both if you're interested in both companies, but you could use that 67K as leverage later to hopefully maybe shift that other company if you're applying to that. So with that being said, the most important thing to know when you're going into a salary negotiation is knowing your worth. And I'm sorry, everyone, I'm going to try to move our virtual friends in the corner so we can see. Oh, no. I'm sorry, virtual friends. I brought you back without sharing my screen. Let's go back here. Oh. Sorry, everyone. Technical difficulties. There we go. Okay, great. Negotiating power. So how to negotiate your salary, right? So the first thing is knowing your value. And the reason you want to know your value is because negotiating power always resides with whomever can provide what the other needs. So you as a job candidate, you have the skills that the employer needs in order to complete that role, right? And a part of knowing your worth is knowing your worth within the framework of the problem that your role is supposed to solve within the company. So a lot of people, and by problem, I don't mean something massive or abstract, right? The problem that you're going in to solve for a company is not helping them resolve or increase their revenue by $3 million for the next fiscal year, right? What I mean by problem here, or potential problem, is if you're applying for a role to be an administrative assistant within a company, that role is on the market because that company is currently lacking in someone who could schedule appointments effectively or coordinate meetings or take meeting notes or whatever it is that's on that job description, right? So you need to have a thorough understanding of what the problem is that you need to be solving and how your skills and experiences relate to that problem. And all of that information, as we've discussed much in the past when it comes to application materials, all of that information is in the job description for you all, right? So what I would do is when I'm reading through the job description, for each responsibility and qualification, next to that bullet, write an example of how you have either solved that problem in the past or how you've met or exceeded that qualification or skill, right? And when you're able to come in with robust and, knowledgeable and self-aware examples, you have confidence. And when you have confidence, you're already in a better position to go about negotiating, right? So going in with confidence and a knowledge of the problems that you could solve within the company is the first step to being a good negotiator. The second attribute of a good negotiator, particularly within this job market, is resilience, right? How you could show that you have resilience more precisely. So obviously in the modern job market, it's very competitive, it's ever evolving. And when people are looking for any type of candidate, no matter what industry or field, they're looking for someone who can improvise, adapt, and overcome. So if you're able to go in from the get-go with examples of when you've gone through a difficult time, when you've overcome failure, what you're proving and communicating to the employer is that I am someone who, no matter what happens within this company or this industry as a whole or the world as a whole, and there's a lot happening in the world right now, right? I am not someone who will fail, who will quit, or who will be a management nightmare, because I have had times in the past where I have had difficulties and I've been able to overcome them effectively. So if you could show where you're confident in the skills that you have to solve the problem and the fact that you have resilience to overcome future problems that happen within the company, you're putting yourself within a good negotiating situation. Any questions from both in-person and virtual people based on that information? Okay, beautiful. But another good thing that you could do, so obviously you could become aware of your own experience, but then you could also do market research to get a better understanding of what other places are offering in terms of salary. So one way that you could assess the market value of your role is by going to these salary comparison websites. So we have ones, all of these are hyperlinked here, and I could send this presentation to you all afterwards. So we have salary.com, pay scale. So let's go to salary.com, right? Let's say, again, we're doing something very basic, an administrative assistant position, and we're interested in looking for that in New York. Okay, lovely. And let's say they'll give you a few different options here. So they say like admin assistant 1, 2, 3. They're just pulling from different job descriptions that are on the internet. But let's say we're interested in administrative assistant 1, which is like a lower level, right? From here, you could see what the median salary is in New York for that role, what the higher end is, what the lower end is, etc. So let's say, for example, the company on their job description for an administrative assistant role that you're applying to offers a range of $50,000 to $56,000, right? You could either assess your experiences, and this is a matter of being like really raw and, radically honest with yourself, right? If you feel that you are on average with other people in terms of your skill set, you could say between that 50 to 56,000, I would expect 54,600 or 54,000 if you want to make it more even, because that is the median average in New York. If you feel you exceed that average in some way though, right? Sell yourself. You'd say, I want the top of that range of $56,000 and here's why. But at least this gives you an idea and a benchmark as to what other places are providing and if that's in market value. So we have all these different ones. Glassdoor is also great. So PayScale and Salary.com operate in very similar ways. Has anyone ever used Glassdoor? Okay, great. So Glassdoor is basically a site where you could look up specific companies and you could see from past employees what they've offered as a starting salary, what the interview process is like, what the work culture is like. So it's great not only for figuring out what the salaries usually are at that company that they offer, but then also what the employee experience is there as a whole. So that's how you can assess market value. The second thing you could do is you can consult people in your network who have held similar roles in your industry in the past. So either by going to Ram Connect or LinkedIn, which I know we've reviewed in the past in these presentations, you can go there and look at maybe, you know, an administrative manager or a chief administrative officer, right, at a company and say, what was your starting salary like? Or what do you see? I mean, obviously a chief administrator officer, they've probably taken quite a few years to get up there. So their starting salary back 10 years ago is going to be very different from today. But they probably hire people within their team who they could say, yes, this is usually what we offer people in that space. And it's very important to keep in mind industry, right? Because an admin assistant in a nonprofit is going to look entirely different than an admin assistant at a law firm or, you know, a bank. So keep that in mind and try to reach out to people who are within your industry when figuring out the salary. And I will go back here. So how to actually communicate your salary expectations to an employer. So I get this question a lot in terms of navigating salary. With pay transparency laws, not only do you have the salary ahead of time, but now because you have that number ahead of time, employers will usually ask you right from the get-go on that initial phone screen about your salary expectations, right? They know that you know the role, they know that you know the number, they know the number, and they'll start to kind of dig into what you think of it, right? Now, the tricky part is you always want to leave yourself room. I'm trying to think of a way to say this. You always want to negotiate salary closer to the end of an interview process rather than in the beginning. Even if the recruiter or hiring manager explicitly asks you what your thoughts are on that from the beginning. And the reason is, number one, you want to put yourself in a good position to prove that you have the skills, again, to solve their problem. So if you kind of make a larger ask on an initial phone screen, they don't know anything about you yet. And they may just assume this person is being demanding when they don't really know all that you have to offer. So you want to go through the entire interview process, gaining their trust, proving yourself. And once ideally you have an offer in your hand, that's when you want to start negotiating. Because it's when you have an offer in your hand that you know definitively that that employer trusts you and they believe that they have the skills to do this job. The second reason why you want to wait towards the end to negotiate salary is because, like I was saying in the beginning, if you're involved in multiple interview processes, if you say in the beginning to a company, I'm great with $52,000, right? I'm good with $52,000. But then you're interviewing at another company that you maybe don't like as much, but they're offering you $57,000. Well, guess what? If you go back to them at the end, say, I really want $57,000 because I could see that I could get that in other places, they're going to say, well, you told us 52 was okay from the beginning. And trust me, they do. You know, when like you see a recruiter writing things down in the beginning of an interview, like they really do keep track of that and keep note of that, especially when it comes to salary, because they want to be able to trip you up in the end. Not to make it sound manipulative, but you want to wait until the end for that specific reason, right? So with that in mind, like if you do on that first initial phone screen, get confronted by a recruiter or hiring manager when they're kind of trying to push to get your salary expectations, one thing you could do is just redirect the conversation and keep it grounded in your qualifications. You could say, thank you so much for asking that question. I am familiar with what the salary range or what the salary is based on your job description. I don't feel that I know enough about the role right now in order to make an accurate assessment about how much, you know, I would be valued for this type of role. But I'd love to keep learning about the role and telling you about my qualifications and return to this another time. So that's a professional way of kind of just pushing it down the line. They may still kind of push into you from there. And if they do, you may, that's why it's good. In a way, it's good to have pay transparency laws now because you could actually go and make comparisons with other job descriptions in the meantime. But you could follow this method if they do keep, you know, pushing for you. And this is kind of the general formula for how to make a good salary negotiation. So you start by one, stating your target and providing a rationale for why you've landed on that target. You share some of the research you've done, either by pay scale or consulting with your network or whatever it may be, and then reemphasize the skills and experiences that you've been stating all along throughout the interview process. Number two, and this is very important, you acknowledge that salary is just one of the factors that will play into your decision to accept the job or not. So a lot of people are really hyper-focused almost on base salary without thinking about the fact that if you have a great 401k match, so a retirement match, or you get gym benefits, or if you get tuition reimbursement, right? Paying $50,000 on tuition that someone else could cover, that kind of makes up for what you may not be getting in a base salary, right? So making sure that you're communicating that salary is just one of the factors, and that you're willing to learn more and hear more about their benefits and see how they work within your personal situation and what you value. And which leads to our next point, obviously, signaling flexibility. You don't want to come across as, this is a one and done deal with the salary that I want. You want to show that you're flexible and open to the opportunities, or open to the possibilities. So this is an example we have for how you could communicate, you know, a salary that you'd like. So let's say you're a program manager, right? So I've taken the time to research salaries for program coordinator roles in the higher education and nonprofit space in New York City. And the data suggests a typical range between 55 and 60,000. Given my expertise in project management, outreach strategy, and stakeholder engagement, and again, these all seem like very big corporate words, right? But if you think about it, as a club leader, you may do stakeholder engagement if you do things with outside alumni or outreach strategy, right? So this doesn't have to be done within a business setting is all I'm saying. So given my expertise in project management, outreach strategy, and stakeholder engagement, as well as my strong academic performance throughout college, I believe a salary at the top of this range fairly reflects the skills and value I bring. And this is something else very important, at the top of this range. So you're not saying, I want exactly 60,000, I won't do anything less. At the top of this range can mean 58 to 59, which is better than starting at 55, right? Then you say, however, I'm also interested in learning more about the total compensation package, including benefits, career development opportunities, and workplace culture. I know salary is just one part of the equation when considering an opportunity, so I'm flexible. And you can tell you this is very brief, but also very confident, and you're restating your skills that you have. So this example, I believe, may be in our shared drive. So in our shared drive, we have like our sample resume templates, cover letter samples. This may be in there as well. But again, you'll be getting this presentation afterwards if you kind of want this template and formula for yourself. And this is just to keep in mind some of the benefits that you will get in addition to that base salary, right? So you'll have the base salary. There are some, I find mostly spaces within the accounting and finance realm will do sign-on bonuses, but I've seen some other like odd-end industries where they'll offer a sign-on bonus. So a sign-on bonus may be a part of the deal. For anyone who doesn't know what a sign-on bonus is, that's like a one-time monetary kind of reward you're granted in the beginning. So you'll get like $5,000 when you first sign on, and then that's it. Obviously, your annual or performance bonus. There's also just standard of living, increases that you get. So that's something to keep in mind, any raises. So something that's worth asking during the interview process is how frequently are performance reviews and how frequently do raises follow those performance reviews if you are up for a raise? Because if that's every 3 to 6 months, then that's a great opportunity for growth. And I think also it's worth, I should have mentioned this earlier, but it's worth asking what the exact opportunities for growth are within that company, because a company may strategically offer you a lower salary, knowing that they want someone who could then go to the coordinator level and then the manager level and then the director level. So they may want you to stay long-term, and they may start you off at a smaller or lower salary because they want you to have room to grow from there. So that's something to also keep in mind, that there may be a strategy behind them offering you a lower salary, and they're not just trying to, insult your skills or experience. Other benefits you have are, stock and equity. You can invest stock within the company depending on the company is. A 401k. So we'll talk about this in a little bit, but definitely investing as early as you can in your retirement. So let's say you're someone who wants to invest $100 to $200 every month out of your paycheck into your retirement savings. A 401k with the company will allow you to, the employer will match that. So then you have, if you're doing $200 a month, $400 a month that you're saving, and you're not even putting that extra $200 in, that's coming from the company. So that's great. Insurance is a big one. Health insurance, health savings accounts, which are tax-free. Pay time off, commuter reimbursement. Commuter reimbursement and tuition reimbursement are big ones, especially if you're in the city and you're not someone who's using a car, right? Being able to get your public transportation or bus, passes subsidized is wonderful. And then if you're also looking to go on to continuing education, the tuition reimbursement is great as well. And then obviously we have the additional perks. So gym memberships, free snacks, tech gadgets. So I remember when I was at my last company, I worked at, it was a vertical farming company. So we had like lettuce all over the place. I got free lunch like nearly all the time. And I was like, I don't need to go grocery shopping this week. So it was money that I was saving on groceries that I never would have thought about when I was initially interviewing for the role and accepted that salary. But again, these all kind of depend on what you're interested in too, right? So if you're spending $170 a month on the gym, but you're saving that through, your company, that's something else to think about. I'm going to pause here before we go into kind of the managing your personal finances bit. Anyone on Zoom or here have general questions about how to go about the process when you're in the interview or offer stage with negotiating salary? Yes, Anine.
What the offer stage is like typically like are they via email or like face to face in that kind of like negotiation regard?
That's a great question. So for people on Zoom, if you didn't hear, I'm afraid you didn't hear because I can't hear you all. The question was, what does usually the offer stage look like once you get there? Is that via email, over the phone? So I find that most companies, they will first call you to express that they are extending you an offer. Usually they'll call you, they'll tell you what the salary is that they've decided on, but then they'll always follow up with an email with that information. Usually the salary that they propose in the offer is not going to be too bizarre to you because they're going to be talking about salary throughout the interview process, so you will know. But again, if you don't have time or you don't feel confident negotiating your salary once you get to that offer call, although you should be probably expecting an offer once you get to a certain point in the interview process, right? You could always, after you have that in print at the end, go back, read it through, and then decide, you want to hop on another phone call with the recruiter or hiring manager and talk about the salary piece further. Because they can always go back in and actually edit your offer. What they can't do is you can't accept that offer and sign it and then say you want to negotiate, because then it's gone through HR, it's gone through the paperwork, and it's a bigger hassle for them. But if it's before you've initially accepted, and you're still kind of in that talking process, figuring out if you will take the job, then you're completely safe. Yeah. Good. That's a good question though, because it is very confusing. They usually like to call you first to get your initial reaction to it. They want to like see if you're really excited about it. So, yeah.
I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah, of course.
In my like throughout when I've had like internships in the past and interviewed for those, like I watch enthusiasm and I'm just like excited about the role, especially because like it can be difficult to get an internship, especially now with like the job market.
Sure, totally.
How do you suggest, especially when it comes to like any time, obviously in an internship, like I've never been like negotiating salaries, like that was the internship.
Right, the internship is just the internship.
Or like the stipend or whatever it was.
Right.
How do you like go about making sure like you're not seeming uninterested in the role, but also not like being like, oh my God, yeah, I'll totally do whatever like you will give me essentially, so that like you don't kind of pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah. So the follow-up question we got was, how do you express enthusiasm about a role when you do get that offer call, while also indicating that you may want to negotiate? Is that the general question?
Yeah, and also like throughout the process, like initial, like throughout like different interview stages, so that like,
and throughout the interview process. Yeah. So I think, showing if you are genuinely enthusiastic about the role, I think that should just radiate very authentically, right? Like, I am really excited about this opportunity. You could emphasize, like, I've loved getting to meet all these different people on the team through these different interviews. I enjoyed the assessment that I had to do. A lot of people love hearing that you enjoyed like that particular project or exercise that you had to do throughout the interview process, because the team spends a lot of time making those. But I think what you could then say is just, and you could kind of lie a little bit, not to, propose this to our YouTube audience, but you can, which will live forever. But you can lie a little bit in saying like, I am juggling other opportunities right now and other interviews, and they're all really wonderful opportunities. I'm just going to have to get back to you on salary because I, am juggling different opportunities with different values. I want to be able to make the most informed decision at the end and the one that's best for me. So here's the thing, and I only say this because I worked both in agency recruiting and in-house recruiting, and in agency recruiting, you're taught to you have to really push to get the other companies where that person is interviewing, because they want to know what the competitors are doing and try to replicate that if it's positive. They may push for you to tell them, don't feel like you have to tell them the other companies, unless you would genuinely like to, and they're very similar. They're offering similar salaries and they're similar roles. If you'd like to, that's fine. But it is not within the recruiter's right to gather that information from you. And in fact, I think in some cases now it is illegal depending on the question. So like, don't feel pressured to offer that information. But I think just expressing your gratitude for their time, the consideration, the role, but then just saying you have other things that you're juggling and you want to be able to get back to them to make an informed decision. They respect people who make self-aware and informed decisions.
Okay.
So anyone else on Zoom? I saw we also just had someone that just joined. Welcome. No? Okay. If any questions come up at the end as well, we'll have a little Q&A. But
Actually, I have a question.
oh yes, we have another question. Yes.
So I'm interested also, like for salary or negotiations in general. Yeah. There are those times, like hopefully you don't get them, sometimes you do, where like you have interviewers that maybe are like very pushy, or maybe they're not in a good mood. So I was wondering, like, if like for instance you're offered the salary, or you're offered the position, and then the interviewer isn't in like a good mood at the moment, should you negotiate then, or should you wait until maybe like they're in a better mood?
That's a great question. Okay, the question was, what if your negotiator on the other end is not in a good mood? First of all, if they're not in a good mood when proposing you an offer, I feel like it's a pretty bad sign, on like a big red flag on the company's end, because the sole job of a recruiter or hiring manager bringing someone new onto the team is that at the very least when they're putting forth an offer, that like they do that with some degree of enthusiasm and joy. So I would say that that's a red flag. But if you generally, I guess the better question would be like when they're being pushy about it, right? When they're kind of wanting you to accept one thing and you kind of want another thing. I think if they're being pushy and they're trying to goad you into one direction that you're not comfortable going in, you could just say, well, thank you for this conversation. I know that you said you would be sending me follow-up information in writing regarding what the offer will entail more of. I'd love to read that through and get back to you. Because either way, once they give you the verbal offer, like they have to send you some degree of follow-up of like what that offer, because they're not going to walk you through the whole offer, like the benefits package, like how many days you have to be in the office versus how many you don't. So like they need to send you that information so you have a robust understanding. And also it could be helpful for you to have that in writing first, because when you have that in writing, you can actually assess, am what I asking for, is it unreasonable given these other things that I didn't know about fully in depth ahead of time? So I would say just asking for in writing before going forward with negotiating powers, kind of like I had mentioned to Zaneve. But if they're in a bad mood, that's a bad sign. Do you have a question as well? Sorry, I didn't know if I saw your hand.
Yeah, I think I'm all open.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Beautiful. All right. So now let's say you've gotten to the end of your salary negotiation process. You've gotten either the salary that you want or the salary that will allow you growth, where you have good benefits, etc. Right? Hopefully you get a good deal out of the either two, right? Then it becomes a question of, with that salary, how do you create an effective budget to support your lifestyle? So I'm going to go out of the presentation here for a moment, just because I'm going to be clicking on a few things. So I would say the most popular budgeting method strategy, right, is the 50-30-20 rule. And this is how you can divide your monthly income based on these three categories. 50% being your needs, things like housing, groceries, transportation, insurance. 30% being your wants. So things like clothing, maybe going out with friends and eating, luxury items, vacations. And then 20% going to your savings. So that being your 401k, your HSA, if you're paying off student loans, things of that nature, right? And there's actually a really wonderful site, and let me just pull this up again for our Zoom people. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with NerdWallet. I love NerdWallet because I don't like doing math in my head, and NerdWallet allows me to not do math in my head. So they actually have this really great article that explains the 50-30 budget rule in further detail. Not that you really need it in further detail. It's a pretty self-explanatory rule, but down here, they have a budget calculator. And also just to keep in mind, the monthly income that they're talking about is your monthly income after taxes. So that's also something to keep in mind when you accept a job offer. But let's say that your starting salary is around $60,000, which after taxes is probably going to come out to around like $3,600 a month, right? So we'll do 3,600. And from the 3,600, you'll see here on rent, groceries, transportation, you should be putting out 1,800. Your wants, so clothing, spending time with friends, blah, blah, around 1,000. And then savings and debt repayment, 720. So you have a general idea of what I should be attributing to each area. Another thing that NerdWallet has, it's really great, is a budget spreadsheet. So let's say, right, you have that general number in terms of the, what was it for needs, 1,800. If you go to this budget template, free budget spreadsheet. Also, please, people on Zoom, let me know if you see this spreadsheet. Because I know sometimes when we're switching between tabs. Let's see, we got something in the chat box. You can see it. Okay, lovely, perfect. So we have this spreadsheet here, right? So if we have the expense for the needs being 1,800, you could break it down. Okay, I'm going to spend 100 on rent for the month, which means I'm going to have around like 400 for groceries, for whatever it may be. And not all of these categories are going to be applicable to you. So like auto insurance, if you're living in the city, you might not have a car, right? But you could just adjust this template and make a copy and adjust it so it's relevant to the things in your life. And then from there, fill it out. I find this kind of like a job search tracker. I think it's really fun. I use it myself. So please do use it, and all of other NerdWallet resources there. Okay, so we've got the basic budget planning. And then the joys of student loans, which are a part of our 50, 30, 20 budget planning, right? So loan payment plans. The nice thing about being a new graduate is that you do have a 6 to 9 month grace period to start paying off your loan. So you do have 6 to 9 months, depending on the loan service provider, to take a pause, find a job, get settled into your new lifestyle before you have to start paying back those loans. But once you do have to start paying back those loans, you need to figure out a payment strategy. So I feel like as the years go by, loans continue to increase, there are new strategies that come up. I would say the two biggest strategies that people rely on are either the debt snowball strategy and the debt avalanche strategy. So I actually put here, and I hyperlinked, oh, sorry, did not mean to bring us there, but Wells Fargo has a really great article on this if you want to read it more about it. So I made sure to hyperlink that there. But basically with this debt snowball strategy, let's say you have 3 different student loans, right? You have one loan that's at $3K with a 4% interest rate, fixed interest rate, a $10K loan with a 6% interest rate, and a $15K loan with a 3% interest rate. With the debt snowball method, you start by paying off the debt with the lowest outstanding principal or balance, right? So if you have the 3K, 10K, and 15K loan, we're not looking at the interest rate, we're looking at the outstanding principal. So you'd start by you make minimum payments on everything, but you'd start by chipping away at that 3K loan first. And then once you go to that 3K loan, then you move on to the 10K loan. Benefits of the debt snowball method are that you're paying things off quicker, usually, when you're starting with things that are smaller, right? And you also get more of a psychological reward because it's easier to pay off a 3K loan quicker, right? Once you do finish that, it gives you motivation to get on to the next loan. But because you're not going on interest, you're allowing interest to accrue more and more over time on those greater loans. So that's the one downfall of the debt snowball method. Then we have the debt avalanche method, which kind of works in the reverse. So that's where you start by chipping away at the loan with the largest interest. So in the numbers I just gave, the 10K loan with the 6% fixed interest rate, that's what you would start chipping away at first. The con to that is kind of, again, in reverse of the debt snowball method, in that you're paying off, it takes a little bit longer to pay that off because it's going to take longer to pay off that higher interest. So it really depends on the types of debts that you're working with and how many debts you have and what those interest rates are. So it's a personal thing that you could look into. But again, there is this article that I linked here. And actually in preparation for this presentation, because I'm not someone in the realm of finance, this is something new for me to talk about. I was doing some research on YouTube of people who have effectively paid off really large loans in a short period of time. And there was one woman who I was watching her YouTube video, and she was talking about how she actually negotiated with loan service providers to give her the lowest interest rate that she had on her highest loan. And she was able to actually make that negotiation and pay off her loans in 2 years, which is awesome for her. So anyways, there's great content out there from people's personal experiences that you should be looking into, in addition to this more boring and academic stuff like articles on Wells Fargo and NerdWallet, but just to keep that in mind. Another important thing to keep in mind is that if you sign up for auto pay programs through loan service providers, I think for most programs, they shave off 0.25% of your interest rate. So it sounds really small, but in the long term, it does add up. So definitely sign up for auto pay. And it's easier for you because then you don't have to remember about going into your account each month. It's already there. But all this to say is if you are having difficulty with paying off that debt, you could also always request a deferment or forbearance plan. So any questions about the budget or loan stuff from anyone here? We've got a thinking face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What can we kind of do now to prepare ourselves for like, being ready for paying those
Loans.
loans? Yeah.
Yeah. So the question was, how can we prepare now for paying those loans? So if you start preparing now, that's great because again, you still have that 6 month to 9 month cushion period after graduation. Do you have like a part-time job? Are you a student worker or like kind of volunteering? Okay. So I would say like what you could do now is kind of start by following that 50-30-20 plan. But I would say like if you have the benefit or luxury where like you don't have to pay essential, like if do you live on campus?
I live on.
Oh, you live on campus. Okay. But if you don't have the, like, you don't have to pay like transportation, right? Because you're just walking to campus every day. Like take advantage of the time you have now to not pay certain things that once you're fully an adult in the adult world, right? That like you have to take care of and start chipping away at that money and putting it into savings. And I would also think about just getting like, especially now that you're at the end of senior year, I'm sure academic projects are not as intense or, prosperous as they were in the beginning of the semester. Like I would think of maybe just getting a small part-time job and at least half of that paycheck that you make every month, putting that away into your savings. And then that you could hopefully get going towards your debt repayment plan.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good question though. We could definitely make an appointment with me. We could talk about that further. Alrighty. So last thing, and we've got a video because I always think we should end things off on a video, right? Talking about credit score tips. So this is something I wish I knew more about when I was an undergrad. I remember when I was an undergrad, I took the advice of a few adults in my life who told me not to get a credit card, when I was in college. So I had a debit card throughout college. And I was under the assumption that you only really need to be able to prove your credit score when you buy a house. But now increasingly in New York, I'm not going to say this is in all cases, but you also have to prove your credit score in a lot of cases when you're trying to rent an apartment. So believe it or not, like the more debt you actually have and the more effectively you're able to pay that off, actually the better credit score you have. So someone with more debts, in some ways is better off than someone in not as much debt because they're looking at how effectively you could pay how many debts off. And it'll show that in the video as well. But we're going to play that so you can see what a credit history is and why it's important to start building a good one now. Oh,
We have 5 million Americans who don't have a credit score. And that can make it really difficult to rent an apartment or get car insurance or even get a job. When credit scores were invented just a few decades ago, they were hailed as a way to democratize lending, lay down human judgment, and let computers make most of the decisions. In the United States today, credit scores have become essential. Not having one can basically lock you out of daily life, and having a low score can make life difficult too. So how did we get here? What exactly are credit scores, and why do they keep so many people from accessing what they need? A credit score starts with a credit report, a record of some personal data points about us, like our zip code and employment history, plus our individual history of paying our debt obligations. Well, some of our debt obligations. See, only data supplied by big lending institutions like student loan servicers, mortgage lenders, credit card companies, and auto financiers end up on the credit reports. We might be paying our cell phone bills and our rent each month, but cell phone carriers and landlords don't share that information with these guys, the credit reporting agencies. There are 3, and each one has its own version of the credit history of more than 200 million people in the US. That data comes from institutions like credit card companies and student loan providers, who send information about our accounts to the credit reporting agencies. The type of loan, the balance, our payment history, and whether the loan has been sent to a collection agency. Then credit scoring companies like FICO and VantageScore take that information and feed it into an algorithm, which calculates a score between 300 and 850. The scoring companies are pulling from the same 3 credit reports, but the scores don't always come out the same. One company's algorithm might put more emphasis on the length of your credit history. The longer you've had access to credit, the higher your score. Another company might put slightly more emphasis on the mix of accounts. The more variety, the higher the score. Other factors include payment history, on-time payments mean higher scores. For loans like mortgages and student loans, lower account balances mean higher scores. And for credit card accounts, the percentage of my credit that I actually use. The lower that percentage, the better. Credit scoring companies make money the same way that credit reporting companies do, by selling your score to landlords, lenders, employers, and others willing to pay for it. Lenders use that information to determine whether to loan us money for a house, a car, or a college education. They also use that number to figure out how much we should pay for that loan. A lender looks at a low credit score, decides I'm a risky borrower, and charges me a higher interest rate than my neighbor with a higher score. And this is where things get tricky for a couple of reasons.
Okay, I think we could start there. Just to let you know, you all don't have to, unless you plan on buying a house right after graduation, you don't have to worry about that last example in terms of the interest that they're charging you on a house, because you don't have to pay interest on rent and for apartments. But as you can see, credit score does really, I think when I was in college, I assumed that if I was able to pay rent on time and that I, had an account with a stable amount of money in it, that I could use that when going out and looking for things like renting an apartment. And that information is not, given to, again, scoring models like FICO or Vantage, which determine your credit score. So getting, paying off your loans in an effective manner helps your credit score, as I told you. Also just having a credit card and, using that sustainably over time. Like something I wish I knew in college was that maybe use your credit card for just one thing. I think a lot of people are overwhelmed by getting a credit card in college because they assume if I just put everything on it, it becomes like Monopoly money. But maybe you just use that as your Omni swipes. Does everyone have Omni here, like for the subways, where you just like swipe your credit card and that's what allows you to go in? Yeah. So maybe you just use your credit card for Omni swipes and then you pay, $30 or $40 a month for that. And you put auto pay so you don't forget to pay your credit card bill, right? But it's a great sustainable way of building credit, but on a very, small scale and, small over time.
Say
Oh.
there are an estimated 40.
No, thank you, Fox. Okay. But that is the end of the presentation as we have it now. I definitely want to open up the space for questions from our virtual people, again, via chat. I'm sorry, I can't hear you all. The audio is not very fun today. Or anyone here as well regarding, yes, of course.
Yeah, so I'm not sure you know this, because I know you said you're not like finance person.
Yes.
But in the video, I did talk about how like different companies have different like requirements.
Yes.
So like how some companies, they value like maybe years of paying off your credit, and others value like variety in assets.
Mhm.
So like, how would I know like which company for me, like I have a credit card, but like, how do I know which company like I'm valued for it?
That's a great question. So I hope everyone on Zoom heard that question. If you didn't, please shout out in the chat box. But I'll be transparent in saying I don't have that answer off the top of my head. However, I know, for example, like I'm enrolled in TD Bank, and if I ever want to check up on my credit score, I could do that through the app. And I know that FICO is the one who gives me my credit score. So I think whatever bank you're enrolled in, you could probably ask through them what the scoring model is. And they would probably, I've never gone to my bank to ask that question, but you could probably go to your bank and say, okay, with FICO or Vanguard, or Vantage, I'm sorry, I'm thinking Vanguard like the other company. What are the criteria that they use? But usually I will say that they try to do it more equally in terms of payment history.
Okay, so like usually you'd say in terms of like years of payment history.
I think the thing that matters most is that it's paid on time. That it's paid on time. They understand, especially with young people, and again, this like shouldn't be an issue for you if you're just looking to kind of be a renter, right, post-graduation. They're just looking, they don't care exactly about the fact that you've only had 2 years of credit experience because you're an undergraduate student. But like if you've been able to consistently pay that money on time, that's what they're going to pay attention to the most. And they see that you're consistently chipping away at your student loans. Which again, isn't a problem for the first 6 months after, but
Actually, I was-
yeah, no, yeah, of course.
Just as a follow-up question, for credit scores.
Yes.
Should you like, just, use your credit card as much as possible, or should you use it like, cause I know, you gain credit by like paying off your credit reliably. But
Mhm.
should you like try to have as much credit as you can by using your credit card everywhere, or should you just try to like, I don't know, like organize it to have like, okay, I'm gonna spend like $40 worth of things on for my credit card like every month, and now I'm gonna be consistent, like which one would be more?
Yeah. That's a good question. Like whether you should use it sparingly or you should really build it up. I think that depends on your relationship with yourself and what you know about yourself in order to pay that back, right? Because I think especially when you're first graduating from college and you are kind of getting associated, if you do have loans, with the loan situation and just paying off everything else that comes with adult life, it could be a lot to also just put everything on the credit card, some things on the debit card, and keep track of both accounts. So I think it really is just up to you and your personal situation. Something I will say about putting everything on the credit card that's kind of nice is that in addition to increasing your credit score, you could also get things like flight points or meal points, or like different points for different things, which you can increase more now if you rely more heavily on the credit card. You can also start off with a secure credit card. So that's where a bank will take, like, let's just say $2,000 of your savings or something. I'm making this up. And you're allowed to use $2,000 in credit that like literally comes from that savings, but they're keeping that on hold at the moment. And once you can prove that you're able to pay that back, they'll give you an actual credit card. But that's a way where you could safely start a credit history, because it's literally coming from your own money that you then get back at the end. So I would start with that if you don't have a credit card yet, maybe, and then kind of go from there. But if you already do have a credit card and you want to increase your spending to increase your credit history or get better your credit history, then go for it. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of self-trust, self-knowledge, Anyone on Zoom as well? Oh, let me just check the chat box. I realize I have not done that yet. Okay. Okay, well, if there are no other questions, let me quickly get Angel your name, because I don't think I was able to send you the sign-in sheet beforehand. But now that I have everyone's name on the sign-in sheet, I will send this presentation to you all afterwards. So you will have the fun little links where you can read more about debt snowballing and read about credit score and history. Yeah. Yeah, the videos, actually, the full video is like 20 minutes long, and it was really fun. They go into the history of why some people don't have great credit. Yeah, it's great. So you'll have access to that as well. But like I was saying a little bit in the beginning, I don't know who caught this. We do this supporting our senior series in the beginning of the spring to kind of catch you all as you're proactively applying for jobs. We're going to be doing more senior programming in April once you all come back from break. So we're going to be doing a workshop on how to build or how to maintain resiliency when on the job search and things get tough. We're having a life coach come in who's also an alumni, and she's really awesome, has worked with many awesome people throughout her career. We're having a grab a slice and get senior advice tabling event. So there'll be pizza. You could also do resume and LinkedIn reviews in that moment and fill out the FDS survey. So we're going to have other programming going on. So definitely keep an eye out on your email for that. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a lovely break. And let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to put I think most of you here have my email. If you do not, I will give you my email. But for everyone on Zoom, I'm going to put my email in the chat box there if you need to get in touch with me. My name's Allie. I'm also on Handshake if you'd ever like to, make a career counseling appointment with me. But in the meantime, I appreciate you all coming, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you in the future sessions.